Madam Deputy Speaker, this government has learned the lessons of the geopolitical instability we have seen and continue to see. In an unstable world, we will keep driving for energy sovereignty and abundance with clean homegrown power. We will not gamble with the British people's money in the fossil fuel casino and ignore the lessons of the past. We have shown a determination to act to help families, and we will continue to do so. And we will work with our allies and partners to defend our national interest and seek to bring this conflict to an end for the benefit of citizens at home and the stability of the world. And I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement. Madam Deputy Speaker, the events in the Middle East this past week have shown why it is so vital that the Government is doing all it can to ensure that UK businesses and households have a secure, reliable supply of dispatchable energy, a supply that we can rely on. Affordable energy is vitally important, but as important is security of supply. There was nothing new in the Secretary of State's statement today. No actions, just notes of some meetings. There were actions and there are actions he can take, and he could take them now, both for supplies and for bills. No matter how much the Green Lobby or the Secretary of State wishes the UK could end its reliance on oil and gas overnight, we cannot. 40% of the UK's energy comes from gas. It's the UK's single biggest energy source. 24 million UK homes and 500,000 businesses are connected to the gas grid. Currently, 43% of the gas used in the UK is produced in our North Sea basin. It is a vital energy source. Every molecule of gas produced by the UK in the North Sea is piped onto our shores and into our grid. The oil produced comes on shore either here or to Europe to be refined. It does not and cannot get caught in the Straits of Hormuz or elsewhere. It is a secure supply of oil for the UK. Our North Sea oil and gas sector has been, is and should remain vital for our national security and as a national security resource for many years. It is a resource that the Government and this Secretary of State is actively trying to shut down, however. The GMB Scotland Secretary has called his plans delusional and mean that we are facing, and I quote, the most destructive industrial calamity in the nation's history, a disaster risking jobs, communities, even higher bills and our energy security. That's from the GMB Scotland Secretary. The North Sea oil and gas industry and its workforce must be protected. He knows that this is the workforce and these are the supply chains which will, if still here, deliver the rollout of technologies like wind and nuclear into the future. The Secretary of State must overturn his ban on new oil and gas licences. Will he? He must immediately give confidence to the industry that they have a future in the North Sea by finally granting Jackdaw and Rosebank. What is taking so long? And to kickstart investment and to stem the accelerating fall in production and to secure the skilled workforce and supply chains, he must, with the Treasury, end the Energy Profits Levy now. Nuclear is the UK's route to energy security. Nuclear works in the winter, can run 24/7 and is at latest prices worldwide shows it can be much cheaper too. But as the Secretary of State knows, our existing plants are nearing the end of life and the Government is stalling on actions to replace or renew new gigawatt-scale sites. They have ruled out large-scale nuclear at Wilver and dropped the previous Conservative government's 24-gigawatt target. In light of current events, does the Secretary of State accept that not granting a new gigawatt-scale plant at Wilver, arguably the best site in the country for a large-scale plant, was a huge missed opportunity? We are still waiting for the Government to accept recommendations from the Fingleton Review, which will make nuclear cheaper and easier to build. When will he do so, and will he do so in full? And I will briefly touch on the absolute Luddite approach to energy that the SNP have in Scotland. They tried to talk a good game and to sound like they support energy workers, energy generation and energy investment, but that's an illusion. They've got a ban on new nuclear, still a presumption against new oil and gas, and they're happy to coat the countryside in pylons and turbines and batteries, but have no plan whatsoever for when the wind doesn't blow. The Secretary of State last year signed a secret energy deal with China, and he doesn't like it to be called a secret, but what other word can there be when he refused to publish details month after month, and he only published it after sustained pressure from my right honourable friend, the Shadow Secretary of State for Energy. And it's no surprise he wanted to keep it a secret, agreeing to cooperate with China, a known threat, on batteries, on cables, on inverters, on turbines, effectively giving a nation that is known to have interfered in numerous sovereign states and has placed kill switches in energy infrastructure it has exported, giving them access to our energy grid. That is at best foolish and at worst reckless. Whatever you call it, it is another threat to our energy security. Madam Deputy Speaker, businesses are struggling with sky-high energy prices and households are bracing themselves for energy bills that may rise significantly this year. The Conservatives' Clean Power Plan would reduce bills by 20%. The Secretary of State could take that action today. Will he adopt our cheap power plan?
Let me answer her questions, which I will do in a moment. I do say to the honourable lady, though, that I think the biggest question for this House and the country is, do we learn the lessons of these crises? You know, half of the recessions that have happened since the 1970s have been caused by fossil fuel price spikes. And we all face a choice, which is we can either learn the lessons of these crises and drive to clean homegrown power, which actually, to be fair, at some points used to be the policy of the last Conservative government, or we can pretend that those lessons don't exist and we can keep repeating the same mistake again and again. And I fear that what's happened to the Conservative Party since the general election is having already sort of gone halfway away from that important lesson, they've now gone fully away from it. And that takes me to the answer to her questions. On nuclear, we're doing the biggest nuclear building programme for half a century. We're doing all of the things that the last government promised and never delivered. Where were they with Sizewell C? They said they'd have agreement in the last Parliament. They didn't. We're doing it. Where were they with SMRs? We're actually doing it. Yes, we will publish the details of Fingleton shortly, and it will be an important step forward on regulation of our industry, which they never did. On the North Sea, I think she said it's an incredibly important resource, which is exactly what I said in my statement. And indeed, we listened to the industry and took a pragmatic approach on tiebacks to existing fields, welcomed by the industry to keep our manifesto commitment of keeping existing oil and gas fields open for their lifetime. But I do just want to pause on this point about new exploration licences, Madam Deputy Speaker, because she raises it. The truth is, as everybody knows, new exploration licences, particularly in the light of tiebacks, will make no difference to production. And here's the really important thing about this, which is it's on average 10 years from exploration to production. And there's a very important report that came out from NESO on gas security of supply last year. What did it say was the biggest single thing we could do for security of supply is to drive towards a clean energy transition. Because the more we fail to do that, the more we are exposed, given that the North Sea is a declining basin that has seen production fall by 75% in the last 25 years and 70,000 jobs lost under them. On the windfall tax, I think I do want to take up this point. The Chancellor says she wants the windfall tax to end, but obviously she has to look at the current circumstances. Now, I notice the Conservative Party now disavows their decision to introduce the windfall tax. The windfall tax has raised £12 billion since 2022 because of supernormal profits, because of the profits that were going from our constituents into the pockets of oil and gas companies. So it's all very easy saying now, well, we shouldn't have done the windfall tax. Well, first of all, they did, but actually I think it was the right thing to do. So, look, absolutely my Iran and the Chancellor listens closely to the industry, indeed was talking to them yesterday on these issues. But I think it is important to recognise these other issues. On the EIA process, we're going to follow the right process. I'll tell her why, because we want to make sure it is legally watertight and it isn't subject to an endless judicial review. And actually, that's what the industry itself wants. I'll just return to the original point, Madam Deputy Speaker. On China. Well, he says on China. So I said last week it was a wacky internet conspiracy theory, and they said, well, no, it isn't. So why don't you publish it? So I did. And now they've got nothing to say, truthfully. And not only did we publish our memo, but I'm glad to say we published theirs from 2015. What did that show? That we were going to get the Chinese to build nuclear power stations for us. Oh, for goodness' sake! So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I do urge all members of this House: look at the facts, look at the evidence, learn the right lessons.